everyone, and welcome to the last video. We are finally over. This is part 3. This is the conclusion series of my gender research in World of Warcraft. There's the lovely Jalia, who you know from the last videos. You'll also see backstabs or pop up in this one. Basically, the recap of the previous videos, we studied gender in World of Warcraft, specifically PvP. This time we're going to look at PvE, and we're going to make a lot of conclusions detailing my own research and a lot of research from other people. So the way we're going to do that is I've broken this whole series up into 5 separate videos. Part 1, the one you're watching now, is what is gender in WoW. Part 2 is gender appropriation. Part 3 is research gender conclusions. Part 4 is who am I, reflections on my WoW gender confusion. And Part 5 is conclusions and the future of Azeroth. All of these are pretty self-explanatory in title. Again, they are broken up by video, so this one is officially what is gender in WoW as soon as this brief introduction concludes, which it's about to right now. So, what is gender in WoW? It may seem like an obvious question, but in order to answer it a little more acutely, we're going to look at 2 things that I think make up gender in WoW: aesthetic and affordance. Let's take a look at aesthetic. So you've got in studying gender in the avatars of World of Warcraft, not the actual players, the first thing you need to understand is that the big difference, again, this is going to seem obvious, but just to get it out there on the table, because we're going to be combing through it more in depth a little later, the biggest difference in the genders themselves is the actual aesthetic, the way the characters look. There are no functional differences between males and females, but the design of males and females is very, very different. These aesthetic differences do make a difference, although they may not seem like it on the surface. They make a difference because a lot of people argue that the female designs in World of Warcraft for female avatars are more closely related to femininity than they are to whatever race they are. And that this is not the same for the males, that the males are generally more in line with their race as opposed to their gender. And the same people that argue this also say that this is the reason for a lot of the gender conflicts that go on in World of Warcraft, similar to the last video's research that you saw on this channel, in which we discovered together that female avatars tend to be killed 1 to 2 additional deaths per every male death in battlegrounds. A lot of people point to this and ask why, and one reason could be because the aesthetic differences in the actual design of the avatars is more conducive to, bleeding over of masculinity or misogyny or whatever. I mean, the argument is simply that these aesthetic differences matter. So I just wanted to go through all the races here and show you on the Horde side now what exactly these aesthetic differences are. The argument is that females tend to, regardless of their race, have the hourglass figure, tend to have more curvature in the form, tend to be more supple, tend to be more gentle looking, even in the undead, for instance, more than her male counterpart, many argue, and I would tend to agree. And this is the basic argument, and in order to understand World of Warcraft gender in terms of avatar, you really have to understand the aesthetic difference and the sort of influence that has. Even the Tauren, which you're looking at right now, many people consider the Tauren female to be the ugliest gender in the game, but even her, you can see, has the curvature, has the hourglass form where right above the hip line it sinks in, and right at the hips it shoots back out again. The Troll, another one commonly criticized for being ugly, still has that form. The Blood Elves and the Goblins, which you're about to see, definitely do. This is, I should point out, a harder argument to make on the Horde side because you've got less westernized avatars, and this is a whole other argument that I'm not going to include, but if you're interested, there's tons of research out there that details the ethnic influences of the Alliance and Horde, and the Alliance as specifically Western and the Horde as non-Western. And that feeds into, if you know the lore of World of Warcraft, that feeds into the lore as well, feeds into colonialization, imperialism, all sorts of things. So that's aesthetic, simply what they look like. Now let's take a look at affordance. Everything in World of Warcraft, almost everything, operates on binary opposition. So, for instance, the factions. There are only 2 factions: the Alliance, which you're looking at the crest of now, and the Horde, its counterpart. Similarly, for gender, there are only 2 options: male, and the obvious male counterpart, female. There is no in-between choice for gender, just like there is no in-between choice for faction. Now, all these things may seem obvious, But when you stop and consider World of Warcraft in juxtaposition with something like Second Life, something where gender is so fluid it may as well not exist because it's an ultimate, you don't have a choice between two options, you have a choice between many, many, many options, even the choice to have no gender. There's really no reason World of Warcraft couldn't work this way, but it doesn't. These are the things we need to realize in order to really understand gender, and these are called affordances. They are things that Blizzard Entertainment allows its players to do based on the design of the game. So to understand gender in terms of the avatars in World of Warcraft, we must first understand what makes gender, which is simply what you just saw, and second, we must understand how these things are designed and why they are designed the way they are. We'll get into that a lot later, or we'll get into a lot of that later, rather. So, thank you for watching this last series. I will be back for the next video on gender appropriation.